discuss something about the animal behavior is concerned. Then this will have the different patterns like behavior, behavioral pattern, types of the behavior, social, reproductive behavior, abnormal behavior, animal welfare issues like the five freedoms, and behavior and welfare relationships, and how to improve the welfare through the behavior, and finally we'll end up with conclusion. So this is the ethology versus psychology. So the scientific study of animal behavior in their natural or usual environment is called as the ethology, whereas the psychology is the scientific study of the human mind and its functions, especially those affecting the behavior in a given context. That's the psychology. So coming to the history of the animal behavior is usually it is started in 1973 onwards, and the founder of the study is famous behaviorist Lorenz and Steinbergen, and they earned the Nobel Prize in 1973. So main theory is animals' behavior evolved through the animal's interaction with its environmental and other animals. So Aristotle in 340 and 322 BC, he studied the Historica Animalium by the history of the animals and collected informations on the pet animal behavior and brought them up in a book format. And conclusion of his work is animals also possess insight and love for their families and also the masters. And the Aristotle says, knowing yourself is the being of all the wisdom. And Thomas More in Utopia 1518 mentioned various behavioral patterns of the animals in his book. The Gilbert White and Charles Leroy. So they also study the animal behavior and origin in their work with the scientific approach and formulation of modern animal behavior study or the ethology is with evaluation theory of the Charles Darwin through his book The Origin of Species by means of natural selection. So Darwin's first book on the behavior, The Descent of the Man, is in 1871, and Darwin's second book on the behavior, The Expression of the Emotions of the Man and the Animals, in 1873. So he wrote the two books. Then what's a behavior may be defined as the response given from the animals to internal and external stimuli. By Pacilli 1996, he defined this, and behavior is a significant indicator of health of the animals. And understanding the behavior is the key to go with good managemental practice, like behavior will always help the health and also the management of these animals, including the domestic animals. So, organized segment of the behavior having a special function is developed through play and social contact with other animals under the influence of environment and also with other animals. And various sexes, breeds, strains, and individual also climate will vary with the behavior. So types of the behavior are normal and abnormal mainly. So normal is maintenance and reproductive behavior. Abnormal is like the animal whenever it's suffering from a disease or aggressions, etc., tail biting, feather pecking, crib biting, and wind sucking. Whereas, or sometimes it's also called as the vices, and the maintenance is social behavior, agonistic behavior, ingestive behavior, and body care behavior, and thermoregulatory behavior. So these are all the normal behavior of an animal, whereas totally the reproductive behavior is different, whereas the abnormal behavior is always expressed by the animal when it is undergoing a disease or the stress or deficiency or many more reasons. So social behavior of the animal is the cattle will have the social life or they always try to stay in the group, and its ability to communicate with each other. And first social bond developed between the dam, means a calf or the dam, and animals that were reared together as calves were more likely to associate when they become adults. Whereas the social felicitation activity of certain individuals, usually rapidly followed by the others, and social hierarchical structure is always there in the domestic as well as the wild animals. And introduction of new animal into a group or mixing the groups will normally lead to fighting until a new social order is established, or survival of the fittest is the theory of the animals. Then agonistic behavior means all form of the behavior by an animal which is in conflict with other. Whereas the causes for this agonistic behavior are when a new group is formed, then a new individual enter into the well-established group, then limited supply of the food and bedding space, then competition among the animals for the breeding. Then aggression acts mixing, always they will try to bite and fight, and when the social hierarchical order is established, they get adjusted. And always there is a limited supply of food and bedding space, then competition among animals for breeding. Always there will be a fight. And to minimize the aggressive events in large individual distances should be always they should be maintained. And ingestive behavior is for the competition for the food. So animal feed in stalls spend very little time feeding compared with that of the free-ranging animals of same species, but they eat many meals in short duration. So, for example, when daily maximum temperature is more than 25 degree Celsius, night grazing varies from 0 to 7% of total grazing time. So, the sheep will graze in the day and always rooting in the pigs. It's called as the rooting, and browsing in case of the goats, because the goats have a very specific behavior of eating the leaves of the shrubs or the herbs or the trees, etc. Whereas the sheep have got the characteristic behavior of grazing, and also the domesticated cattle to have the grazing pattern. Whereas the different components of feeding behavior in livestock is rumination is about 15 to 20 times, but duration of each period may last from few minutes to 1 hour. So the rumination is the characteristic feature, and grazing time for different animal, cattle it is 4 to 14 hours depending upon the availability of the grass, etc. Sheep it's the voracious grazer, it takes about 10 hours, whereas the horse it is 2 to 3 hours. Then the animal have the appetite for energy and water requirement. Cow it is 38 to 42 liters, buffalo it is 65 liters, and sheep 3 to 6 liter, pig it is approximately, all these are approximate and depends upon the different time and situation and environment. So the animals body care behavior is always there. You might have seen that the dogs will lick their body, and also the cats will groom their body by licking, etc. And it always includes the scratching. The dogs will scratch their body by their hind leg and shake the head and lick. Grooming behavior done to minimize the disease and parasitism, and also sometimes the auto grooming and allo grooming. Auto means the animal itself will groom its own body, and sometimes another animal will groom the animals of the other. So auto grooming by head, and case of horse is a very common thing, whereas the self grooming is also a very common behavior in case of the cats or any feline species. In health, generally, if it is there, there is a problem of the health, the body care activities and comfort should become reduced or arrested. So, dust bathing by the chicken, they peck the mud and take some mud and put on their body. And also the elephants to have a very characteristic behavior that they will pour lot of water and also the mud on their body and roll on the mud to get their body temperature down. And many animals will have such grooming behavior or body reducing conditions, etc. With the classical example of the buffalo, that it will always find a wallowing tank, and even though it's very, very under dirty or with lot of mud, it will enjoy the water bath always and find always the wallowing tanks. Whereas the thermoregulatory behavior of the different domestic animals like the cattle always find the sheltering whenever there is a sunshine, whenever they want to take rest or want to have the mastication, at that time they will go under a tree and take rest. Whereas the animals, when the sunrise or sometimes whenever they find too much heat, etc., they will always find a shelter on a hot day to seek the shade of the trees. And animals show panting and also wallowing. Panting is a very common thing in case of the dogs because the dogs do not have the sweat glands. Hence, they try to take out the body temperature by panting, whereas the wallowing is always with that of the buffaloes. And in cold or shivering, especially in case of cold, the animals, horses often generate herd galloping, thus raising their body temperature. And some of the animals will hide in caves, etc., to maintain their body temperature. And always they will come to the sunlight to increase their body temperatures. So this will happen most of the time in case of the wild animals like giraffe, deers, etc. So they will come to the sunlight and take the warm bath from the sun rays. And the buffalo and pig needs wallowing tank for the regulations. Here you can see in this photo that the pigs also take the wallowing, whereas the cattle shelter always in case of the shade. Whereas the reproductive behavior is divided into male and female once again because the behavior is totally different. And estrus behavior cow, it will have the restlessness, raises the twitches tail, then arches the back and stretches, and continuous bellowing will be there. Then mounts and stands to be mounted, vulva sniffed by other cows. That is called as the reflex and also the pheromones. Then the sheep, usually Eve seeks out ram and associates closely with it, and goat rapid tail waving and poor appetite for a maximum of 1 day. Horse, there will be frequent urinating stands, and the same thing will be seen in case of the buffalo also. Then pig, so stands for riding test or pricking above the ear. That's the characteristic feature. And the buffaloes, there will be continuous bellowing sometimes and continuous maturation, etc. So this varies from one animal to the another animals. So whereas the behavioral characteristic of Easter in case of farm animals, so this is called as the riding test. So whenever you press the back of the pigs, they stand firmly, and snipping up or flicking up of the vulva of another buffalo is the characteristic feature. Whereas in case of the buffalo, these horses, there will be urinating stance. Always mounting is accepted by cow in case of the estrus, or else it will not cooperate. Whereas this is also seen in case of the horse, called as the special type of the behavior, the open mouth and sucking the air from the mouth. So this is also, for example, the horse and the tiger, the lion, and also the goat. Whereas the male sexual behavior, so libido is an internal state that is measured by showing sexual behavior. So this includes noising of the animal's perineum, that's called as the Pelham response. So nosing up of the female's perineum area, then nudging, then phlegm response, except in case of pigs. In all animals, it will be there. And flicking out of the tongue, then striking out with a forelimb. Then low pitched bleating will always be there. Low pitched bleating. That's called as the this type of the behavior is called as the phlegm response. Then abnormal behavior is also known as the anomalous behavior or behavioral aberrations which are repeated. And stereotype C, type E, is a relatively invariant sequence of the movements that has no obvious purpose and indicate poor welfare behavior, especially the licking its own nose, etc. So, number one is the tail biting in case of pigs. It's a wise abnormal behavior. And tongue rolling and intersucking in case of cows. It's also an abnormal behavior. Cried biting and sucking by the horses. Always it will take. And feather pecking and egg sucking in hens. So such behaviors initially may be started due to the deficiency of certain minerals, especially of the phosphorus, but later they become adjusted to that particular behavior and it become a bad behavior, and that is called as the vices. So the causes of abnormal behavior are always overcrowding, too much crowding and competition for the food, and monotonous environment, continuous stall feeding of an animal will induce a bad behavior or vices, and suppression of natural instincts of the animal, especially the grouping behavior and to be social with its own herd, etc. If it is continuously inhibited, then they will start the behaviors, bad behaviors, and inadequate exercise, continuous stall feeding once again, malnutrition, especially the phosphorus and calcium deficiencies, lead to the abnormal behaviors. Especially it's called as the PICA, P-I-C-A, means eating inanimate objects. And sometimes the infections may also cause the similar type of the behavior, like some of the plant toxicities like Ficus zehela and other things. And possible avenues for the prevention of abnormal behavior is altered housing management. Suppose if it is too much crowded, then you have to remove some animals and make them to have the feeding somewhere else in a new shed, and provide adequate space to avoid the overcrowding, like making the animal free, so that the tying the animals with adequate distance, so that provide adequate exercise, supply adequate roughage and balanced diet. Sometimes this also causes the abnormal behavior, like drinking its own milk and sometimes chewing the tail of another animal, and sometimes consumption of the rope, etc. Then also the plastic. Then sometimes consumption of the cloth which is allowed for drying, etc. Then visual separation of affected animal is also another call of the abnormal behavior. So what is animal welfare? Means World Organization for Animal Health defines the animal welfare as how is an animal is coping with the condition in which it lives. So that's called as the animal welfare, and if the normal behavior of the animal is not hampered, that's called as the animal welfare issues. So an animal is a good state of welfare, and if it's healthy, comfortable, well nourished, safe, and able to express the innate behavior, and if it is not suffering from that of the unpleasant states such as the pain, fear, or the distress, the animal should not suffer from all these things. Whereas the five freedoms of the animals are freedom from thirst, hunger, and malnutrition. This is number one. Whereas the animal should get always sufficient food. Or if a farmer rears a cow and other thing, and if he doesn't provide it the sufficient quantity of the feed and water and nutritious material, then that's also the cruelty to the animals. Whereas the freedom to express normal behavior for the species, like the wallowing behavior or having the mastication and etc. Then freedom from fear and distress is also another freedom of the animal, and also the freedom from pain injury and diseases. So any animal which is reared for the domestication purpose should never be injured, hurt or pained, or else if it is suffered from some of the disease, it is the right of the animal to get it treated by the qualified veterinarian who is having the knowledge of the treatment, and freedom from discomfort due to the environment, which is the human made environment for the animal. So, how to assess livestock welfare in the farm? That's one of the question. And in many farms, we see that there is no welfare or ethical issues. And so when we identify which aspects of the five freedoms have been potentially been compromised, of course, we need to focus on the issues like severity of any animal issues, welfare issues are compromised, duration of welfare is compromised, number of animals affected are also compromised. And we need to take the care of any animal suffers from distress or deprived of the five freedoms, especially the behavioral indicator to assess the welfare. There are certain behavioral changes will be there in every animal. Then we have to recover or recognize that thing. And behavior study is always indicative of how the animals feel and choices that animal makes, and reaction to the variety of the stimuli, how it is going to have the stimuli, and also the behavioral indications in welfare in comparison with that of the physiological measures. There are certain advantage, and they should be non-invasive. Then non-intrusive means it should not disturb the animal with any type of the intrusion. Then there should be very less equipment usage and can be done away from the lab. That's all the advantages of behavior indicators in welfare in comparison with that of the physiological measure. Whereas the disadvantage of this method is interpretation is somewhat difficult and inaccurate also. That's why it is having some disadvantage. So certain behavioral indicators of the livestock are, for example, the good welfare, there will be alertness, then curiosity, ranges of activities will be there, interaction with other members of the herd, and very active interaction with the humans and play. Whereas the poor welfare indications are limited range of the activity, panting or sweating, huddling or shivering, then depression will also be there instead of the free and active behavior. Abnormal fear or aggression towards the human type and stereotypic behavior will always be there, like the rolling up of the tongue and sucking its own milk, and sometimes rope eating, and many more vices are always there. Whereas the welfare issues in India are uh, much more focused rather than that of the other countries, because ear notching in case of a pig is a unethical treatment, and castration in cattle and goat and disbudding in case of the cattle, all of these are considered as not so ethical. So the ritual method of slaughter of the animal, and so there are the religious aspects of slaughtering of the animal. The halal method is there, and also the jatka method is there. With both methods do make the animal to have a lot of pain during its death also. So even though the animal does not have the right of living, it has got the right of peaceful death. Hence, limited opportunities for natural behaviors is also another thing. For example, the animal in battery cages, wheel and gestation crates, all these are stamping, etc. All these things are unethical issues. Whereas the ill treatment of animal during the handling, then also transportation. This is one of the most devastating, because many times while transporting, there are guidelines of Government of India, and the animal welfare issues, especially the square feet place available for an animal should be a minimum available, and always the speed of the lorry or the container which transport the animal should be very comfortable to that of the animal. And also there should be very less jump, etc. Then the driving should be very slow, and the animal should be very well ventilated, and it should be very comfortable during the transportation, or else it will have a lot of transportation stress and will suffer from certain diseases like theileriosis, etc. So the failure to provide adequate diet or sometimes failure to treat the diseases, especially, is also another ill treatment towards the animals. So lack of normal animal husbandry practice and getting the animals treated with unqualified person is also another cruelty to the animal, because the animal has got the right of getting treated by a qualified doctor. As you get the treatment with a qualified doctor, maybe a good surgeon or in a good hospital, etc. So the another thing is beating and kicking up the animal is totally prohibited, and keeping the animal in wet and uneven floor, always the slippery, lameness, and the food problem, and transportation of the animals like this, putting them in a heavy cages and causing lot of discomfort and exposing them uh, to the untoward environment is also another thing, and beating is totally prohibited. Then the animals' behavior, especially whenever the animals are having the social behavior, they will be very, very happy, and also they play with each other and fight with each other, which is a normal behavior of the animals, especially the wild animals, wild birds, etc. They do show such type of the normal behavior. But whenever there is a human disturbance is there and lot of voice and noise and the mining, etc., the animals get disturbed or they get offended with the application of the pesticides or too much sound or any other polluting substances. So all such things are called as the animal ill welfare systems. So government of India has got different welfare organizations like FW FAWC, Farm Animal Welfare Committee, and now CCSA, Committee for the Control and Supervision of Experiments on the Animal. Especially this CCSA is under the Ministry of Animal Husbandry and Dairying, and as always it frames the rules for conduct of the experiments on either small animals or large animals through the institutional ethical committees in different institutions which are using the animals for the biological experiments. So the whereas the Compassion in Action Animal Welfare Board of the India, CU, Compassion in Action, especially the all animals, especially, and also the National Institute of Animal Welfare is another organization which also looks towards the animal welfare issues. Apart from this one, the PETA and many more organizations are also there, which are non-government organizations, and the PETA means the People for the Ethical Treatment of the Animal, and Wildlife Rescue and Rehabilitation Center, WRRC, then also Blue Cross Foundation of India Madras, and Goal Foundation or group of the animal lovers. They found it's an organization, and Animal Aid Unlimited is another organization, non-governmental organization. All of these will work towards the welfare issue of the animal, whereas the PETA is always taking care of the welfare issues in a much higher voice. And Federation of Indian Animal Protection Organizations is there, which consists of all these organizations, and implication of the behavior of for the livestock and management. So the animal welfare issue is one of the important issue, because whenever we take the welfare of the animals properly, then they produce more and more milk or the meat or the egg or whatever it may be, for which we are rearing the animal, and the reproductive behavior sometimes get compromised due to the limited space, change in the climate, heat, stress, deficiency of the food or the nutrition, and it should be taken care. And if animal is not behaving properly, that also indicates something, there is a problem in the management which needs to be investigated always. Then abnormal behavior reflects poor welfare, therefore ways to sort out the management conditions need to be improved always. So the housing management, there should be adequate flooring. The flooring should not be slippery, wet, and uneven, which always make the animals to slip down and get fractured and dislocated. And roofing should be proper to prevent heat or cold stress. And walls should be sufficient height to maintain adequate ventilation. And many cattle sheds we have seen that the walls of the cattle shed are risen in such a way that there is no cross ventilation in between. So that's also unethical way of treating the animals. And animals normally live in herds or the flocks, and approaching parturition, it should be removed from the herd and placed in a calm and quiet place with individual pen with sufficient animal husbandry practices and care, especially towards animal. And as the consequences of poor welfare, European Union passed a directive in 1997 where in which the group housing up of the calves after 8 weeks of the age and individual pens at least as wide as the height of the calves as wither and no tethering of the cows except less than 1 hour at feeding time only. So all these rules are made in the European Union instead of making the cows of strength. And feeding management is also another important behavioral issue, and group feeding, enough feeding places with barriers between individuals should be provided, and adequate colostrum should be given to the newborn animal. And this is one of the ill practice which is followed by almost all the farmers in India is concerned. So they deprive the male cows with the mother's milk, and the cows will die within 2 or 3 months after developing the pot belly appearance. And always because of the greedy nature, they sell the milk to the societies without retaining anything for the calf. And to prevent feed wasting, a trough should be designated to suit the particular behavior pattern that each species exhibits while feeding. And balanced animal nutrition is always very much required, and provide continuous clean water. And some animals, if they become downers, then there should be a downers cow lifting machine should be kept in a big dairy farms. And healthcare is also another important issue. Then major healthcare problems are the lameness, then the mastitis, reproductive problems, which cause lot of pain to the animal. And the management control should be there in such a way that surrounding up of the animal should be very clean and dry, and periodic deworming and vaccination of the animal should be done. Isolation of the affected animal should be done, and immediate treatment to any type of the injury with a qualified doctor. That's also I say that who can diagnose the condition of the animals and treat it immediately. That's also another important factor. So there is one research article where in which it is told that the effect of early weaning on milking behavior, production and reproduction of the Tharparkar cows, then the 14 Tharparkar cows have been classified into suckling group and weaning group, and uh, the behavior of each and every animal is studied, which is studied by the scientists of, then it is the nutshell. Overall, they have studied different parameters like sucking and weaning with all the milking behavior, total milk duration, reproductive performance, etc. But the weaning effect can enhance the conception rates reduced calving to conception interval in postpartum Tharparkar cows, but milk production has declined during early lactation. That's one of the finding they have found. Weaning effect can increase the conception rate because of the hormonal secretions, especially stopping the prolactin early, and also the milk yield is decreased during early lactation because of the love towards the cows by Tharparkar indigenous cows. So, coming to the conclusion part of this thing, behavioral activities are often used as indicators of the welfare. We can use behavioral indicators to recognize whether the livestock is in poor or good state of welfare. And monitoring behavioral activities of livestock can be helpful to livestock producers by identifying the problems and further implementation of potential solutions for better livestock management and also the welfare issues. So, thus we are ending with that of the behavior aspect of the domestic animal with a special emphasis to that of the cattle and the other domestic animals. So, in general, the behavioral pattern is changing from one animal to other animal like cattle, sheep, goat, pig, poultry, horses, and any other domesticated birds, etc. So we have to take care of all these natural behaviors in such a way that the animal should be very comfortable and it has got the right of living comfortable life just like us. So with this, we'll conclude this particular topic. Thanks a lot. Bye. Have a nice day.